So we're going to talk about the Mindfulness Institute's Reading Readiness program this afternoon. Well, actually, we're not going to talk about the program. I'm going to refer to the program. We're going to talk about children, because at the Mindfulness Institute, which is a research and training institute in Johannesburg, but with a far-reaching influence throughout the world, I think our work has been translated in 8 or 9 languages, which include simplified Chinese, Russian, Italian, Spanish, lots of other languages. So we are very fortunate at the Mindfulness Institute that we can work with teachers, we can work with the brain, because that we are passionate about the brain. But you know what? We are more passionate about children than the brain, and the brain in isolation is absolutely no good. If you take the brain, you put it next to a body, the brain's useless. It needs the body to input information and to output it. For that, the brain needs sensory input, it needs motor output. So at the Mindfulness Institute, we looked at the situation in South Africa in terms of reading. And obviously, we're guided by the Pulse report, numerous Pulse reports. And it is quite disheartening to see how poorly we perform. Well, at least we consistently last for a couple of assessment periods. So at least we're consistent. But it's not in the best interest of our children, because there are a couple of moments in one's life where you need to transition. And if you transition well, the trajectory of your life is changed immediately. Birth is such a transition period, but so is school readiness. That transition period between grade R, please listen carefully, grade R and grade 1. I'm not talking about a transition phase between grade RR and R, because triple R, double R, and R is one phase. The transition period between grade R and grade 1 is phenomenally important, and it's always limited by or amplified by the first transition into life and how easy that was. But that's a talk for a different day. This afternoon, we're specifically going to talk about transitioning from grade R to grade 1. So if you are grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, remedial teachers, grade 4, high school teachers, you're all welcome. But our focus, our emphasis this afternoon is the grade R child. And the grade R child isn't just in grade R on its own. It had to get there through a period of time and lots of development. So without further ado, let's talk about the grade R child. And if we talk about the grade R child, I will refer to the curriculum, but always remember that a curriculum is developed for a specific target group. And if the curriculum is more important than the target group, the curriculum will not meet its target or objectives. Because when we look at the grade R child, it's a very particular child. It's a child that's about to find their wings, but they need roots in preschool to be able to find their reading wings in primary school. So let's make this very clear. This afternoon is not about a reading program. It's a reading readiness program. And because the Institute, we really love the preschool child, because did you know that the best part of 90% of a child's brain and the brain that they will use for the rest of their lives, can you hear there's a 10% margin for improvement and for change? But in essence, a child's brain at the age of 6, given good nutrition, given good health, giving stunning stimulation, the 90% of the brain is developed at the age of 5 turning 6. So if there was little development, there's a little developed brain in grade R that we can impact on. But that's why when we talk about grade R, we can't talk about grade R in isolation. There's a run up. So the first 3 years, from conception to 3 years is one phase, and then grade triple R, grade double R, and grade R is a second phase. They belong together. That's the developing child, physically, emotionally, socially, cognitively, intellectually, however you want to say that, obviously spiritually as well. But in terms of schooling, when we look at this beautiful grade R child, and we look at the development of their ears, and we look at the development of their eyes. And if our primary way of teaching preschool children is to talk and to show, talk, it's auditory, we use their ears, show, we activate their eyes. We are predominantly using two of our sensory systems. We've got loads of senses. You see, this is not the nature, this formal kind of approach where they have to sit down, they have to sit at desks, facing the same direction like grade 1 class or many grade 1 classes, because there are even progressive grade 1 classes that don't conform to that kind of structure. It's not a bad structure. It's not necessarily the only or the best structure. When we look at the grade R child, we look at a child that is learning in a multisensory way. So the moment we say multisensory, if you look at the screen at the bottom, you'll see the ears and the eyes are still there. If I go back, same place. They're the last to develop because the ears and the eyes are both paired senses, paired like in two. So there are two ears and two eyes. And the senses develop in a very specific sequence. And it's always the ears before the eyes. I think many people would disagree with me and say, no, the eyes develop before the ears. Well, no, if you look at physiological development, if you look at neuroscience, it's absolutely blatantly clear that a baby in utero can hear mother tongue already, not speaking it, but hearing it, the vibration of mother tongue. So they pick it up in utero, but it's pitch dark. So the eyes are actually 9 months behind auditory development at birth. And do you know that it takes a baby around about 8 to 10 months, 8 months, if it's a full-term baby, it takes them more or less 8 months to have clear vision. The first 8 months, their vision is more like when you're in a shower, a beautifully steamed up shower. So you can see movement, you can see outline, you can see light and darkness, you can see contrast, but you can't see clearly. So 9 months in utero, 8 months in life, well, that's a 17-month head start, an auditory head start. And you know what? It doesn't stop there. Did you know that the eyes are really only at the age of 7? Now the eyes neurophysiologically ready to focus on flat surface like screens or paper. Did you know that? Well, there's a huge difference between facing blank paper and facing a worksheet. There's a huge difference. Blank paper and blank screen that they can draw on, they can face for years, way before they need to face, and the eyes are neurophysiologically ready to interpret what they see on a flat screen. Isn't that fascinating? So a preschool is a place of multi-sensory learning. And if we look from the left-hand side, that hand represents our biggest sensory organ, which is the skin. And the picture next to it, if you can see, it's got a gray background, it's not white, because the hand, the nose, the mouth, the ear, and the eyes all refer to the senses that are focused on the world around us, the environment. Where the little gray one, the second one, that moving person, it represents our inside senses. That's proprioception, it's the vestibular system, and it's kinesis. Now, I'm not going to talk jargon this afternoon, but there's a couple of things we need to understand before we can understand the Mind News Institute's approach to reading readiness. I continue categorically. Our children are not reading ready. That's why our reading outcomes are so incredibly poor. So this afternoon, we're going to talk about how does a child get ready to learn to read in grade 1, not before grade 1, in grade 1. Because a child needs 6 years after birth, 6 years to develop all their senses, for those senses to integrate, for those senses to send one message to the brain to be able to process that information, and we'll get to language a little bit later, and then tell the muscles how to respond. Because if the child doesn't have fundamental control over their physical body, and that includes their sensory motor system, I can tell you that child's not ready to learn to read. And you're going to age, and the child is going to cry and lose their love of learning if we don't get it right from the beginning. So multisensory learning, it means we've got one sense and one skin. We've got one inside sensory system. So it's a system, but it's one. We've got one nose and one mouth. Oh, and all of these single senses, the skin, the inside sensory system, our nose and our mouth are more primitive. And that's why every human being, if you learn something new, irrespective of your age, you would prefer to learn hands-on, concrete learning, because it gives you a grip on what you are learning. So our two paired senses, the ears and the eyes, are advanced senses. And if we jump to our advanced senses without paying sufficient attention to our primary senses, we are setting the child up for failure. We are robbing a child of a future, and we don't want to do that. Because can you see when a child learns with their whole body, if it's multisensory, it's now never sitting down. It's always with the whole body. There's movement involved, because the moment a child is learning with their whole body, they immediately engage their heart. And this is very important, because the brain and the brain's ability to learn depends on two principles. The brain prefers multisensory experiences to paired sensory experiences. So talk and chalk, it has its value, and especially for older children. But our younger learners in foundation phase, and now I'm talking all the way through foundation phase, they learn best when they learn with their whole body. Yes, I understand about a curriculum, and I understand about the limited time frames within grade 1, grade 2, and grade 3. But the problem is, if learners aren't ready for grade 1, 2, and 3, you're going to battle even more, because they didn't benefit sufficiently from multisensory experiences preschool. So when a learner, when a child learns in a multisensory manner, and when there's repetition and repetition and repetition, but multisensory repetition in a fun way, did you see those faces? Did you see the joy? Can you see those missing front teeth? That's just sheer giveaway. This little one is on her way to become school ready. She's physically getting ready. But the multisensory experiences preschool that's repeated over a period of time is just like walking through tall grass. I'm sure you've seen people walk through tall grass, especially in the rural areas, where they move between home and work. And initially, when you walk through tall grass, what happens? It's hard work. You have to battle to you have to fight the grass. And you never know, is there a hole in the ground? Is there a rock in the grass? Or is there maybe a snake in the grass? So when you go through tall grass the first time, it's slow, it's laborious. And the second and the third and even the fourth time, it's hard work. It's not easy. But the more you repeat, that's why there's a place for rote learning. But can you see repetition and rote learning follows on multisensory learning? Because the brain glues information into the brain, into memory, when it's a multisensory experience and if there's sufficient repetition. You see, this afternoon, we want to talk about reading readiness. And reading readiness is the ability of a grade R child to convert sound, obviously, with your help, to convert sound, oral language, into written language. Oh, listen carefully. Oral language, what does it mean? It means to be able to hear. It means to be able to understand. And it means to be able to speak that language. That needs to be on a level of proficiency before we can convert sound into letter symbols like the ABC. And that's typically visual. That conversion, because ultimately when you're going to read, you're going to use your eyes to make sense of the symbols on the page. Okay? But there's a sequence again. Can you remember that sequence in utero? The ears need to develop and really become proficient and understanding the language of learning and speaking that language of learning. And then when they really, really hear the language and they can start identifying individual sounds in words, we don't teach a child a symbol. A symbol is a dead, abstract thing. A language is a living, breathing thing. So we teach children language. And we'll talk about how do we teach children language, especially if they're second language learners. But they need to be submerged in language. And then when they start hearing and identifying different sounds in the words, the language that they are understanding and speaking, then they are ready to start converting that into picture symbols. Okay? But it's a complicated process. Ladies, hear me. I tell you categorically, our children are failing to learn to read because we fail to teach them coding, how to code the sound of language into the symbols of language. I'm going to talk about that and I'm going to repeat the same thing many times this afternoon. So everything starts with a sound, verbal language. So that automatically means if a child is learning in a second language and that child is not proficient in the second language, in other words, if they don't understand the language, it is child abuse to expect a child that can't speak a language to conquer the code of that language, which is writing and reading. I hope you agree with me. And if you disagree, please use the chat box. I'm not going to pay attention to the chat box now, but at the end, if there's time, I'll answer the questions that are entered into the chat box. So this afternoon, our primary focus is how to enable children preschool to convert the sound, oral language into written language, but in a way that is congruent with the nature of a preschool child. And it's always playful, it's always multisensory. And when we teach them to write a symbol before they're expecting to read a symbol, we enable them to learn how to code sound into written symbols. Oh man, it's fun. If we do it without pressure, and if we do it over a period of time, it works like a charm. So that's why some people say, okay, so this is a very, very interesting approach. It's very unconventional because we've always believed that you teach a child to read and then to write, or that may be a simultaneous process. At the Mindfulness Institute, our research has shown if you expect a child to decode without first teaching them to code, that's what you get. Our Paul's results is evidence that that's not working optimally. Just give me a moment. Let me just close the windows. Because the moment there's an interference with sound, learning is just so much more difficult. So how do we teach a child the language of instruction? So the first massive hurdle. So we're going to talk about the pre-skills that need to be in place before a child is reading ready. and being proficient in the language of teaching and learning in grade 1, it goes without saying. It's primary. And how do we do it? Through stories and poems. Because remember, the moment there's a response, there's an emotional response. Look the joy, look the variety of emotions that they are experiencing. Because the moment a child is hearing a story or a poem, and that is presented in a lively and interactive manner, what happens? They automatically engage. And when they automatically engage, the intensity of that experience is like a multisensory experience that codes very strongly in the brain. It means they don't forget so easily. So it creates a hook in the brain. The story, the vocabulary used in that story or in the poem or the themes. Because remember preschools, a preschool child learns predominantly in a multisensory way. And that's why in a grade R class, it is not responsible to have a theme table. It's a necessity, because on a theme table are concrete objects that they can touch and turn and even smell and sometimes taste and talk about. And obviously they see that's a multisensory experience. So, and when they touch these objects and you name them while they touch it, they acquire a language in a fun and an age-appropriate way. And what happens with stories and poems? Well, if you use a word in a story or a poem that they don't know, what do? We stop and we explain, we explore. If it's possible, you bring an object to show them what that thing looks like, and then they engage. And they get submerged in a language. And then they act it out. We use fantasy and drama. Okay, so the senses have absorbed the language and the meaning, and now the muscles are acting on it. And what are we doing? We're gluing it in the language, in the brain. Because when we submerge a grade R learner in a theme, and every activity that we do during that week is related to the theme, what are we doing? We are expanding language and concept in a way that a preschool child can learn very, very easily. So we need to submerge a child in a language, and only in that language, not in another language. Because if you use a language to explain another language, a sharp child will always wait for you to translate. And then they stay with the original language. So if you want a child to become proficient in a second language, in a first language and a second language, we have to submerge them so they can develop vocabulary. You see, if the ear can't hear it, and the brain can't understand it, and the mouth can't say it, they're not going to learn to read and write that. Because if a child, for example, says tat, T-A-T, instead of cat, C-A-T. If they say tat, they're going to write tat later on. If they say fish instead of fish, they will say what they hear. Why? Because the ears develop before the eyes. And in grade R, we have this marvelous opportunity, an entire year where a child can hear a sound, the sound of a word, and then the beginning sound of a word, and you can show them, you know what that sound looks like, and then we can show them the picture sound. We are not teaching them to read. We are teaching them to code. So, but you can't code, you can't convert sound, oral language into written language without understanding the language. You need language proficiency. And then we get to this another very important pre-skill, and that's creative activities. You see, it doesn't matter if the child is left or right-handed, but I want you to notice how proficient this left-hander is. And can you see how all the crowns are lying on the left-hand side? It's not because the child can't cross their midline. It's just energy efficient. So they can pick up a crown on the left-hand side and then draw with them. See the engagement of the right hand. See the angle of the page. All of these things are incredibly important. But the most important thing you are looking at the moment is a blank page. Because when you are faced with a blank page, you need to think. If you are faced with a coloring in picture or a worksheet or a workbook, somebody else thought, put it on paper, and you just need to do one or two little activities. You see, creative activities offer a child the most phenomenal opportunity to convert their multisensory experiences. You know those themes, those outings? You know that story that was just so enthralling? The creative activity enables a child to create picture symbols. Can you see? There's the progression from verbal language. Creative art offers a child the opportunity to convert verbal language, written language, spoken language, not written language, spoken language, to convert that into picture symbols, the child's own picture symbols. I have no clue what this child is drawing at the moment. Does the child have a clue? Absolutely. Can you see the child is positioning things? The child is writing us a story. The child is busy with a picture essay. It takes a preschool child 3 years to learn to convert experiences, thoughts, themes into symbols on a paper. Understand this. This is vital to pre-reading development. When a child draws a picture, paints a picture, fat crayons, thin crayons, triangular crayons, using paintbrush, thick, thin, using that with paint, with jig on a colored page. You know, there are hundreds of different ways that we can engage preschool children to create pictures. Yes, it's marvelous for fine motor control. And I'm not disputing the importance of that. Obviously, that's incredibly important. But there's a much more important process at play. And that's when a child draws a picture. They are learning to convert their thoughts, because they can't draw a house before they thought of house, the word house, in their brain. Can you hear me? So they learn through creative art. It's vitally important that a child is exposed to blank pages and a variety of equipment to create picture symbols for a period of 3 years before they start converting sound into picture symbols, and that we call writing. I hope you hear that child that comes to grade R, or sometimes they even enter grade 1 without a grade R, they've never held a paintbrush, never held a crayon, a variety of crayons, a variety of paintbrushes, a variety of smells, in terms of the crayons and all the other cocoa pins and all of those kinds of things, without scissors and glue. They've never made a collage. Can you see that they are completely and utterly not ready to learn to convert the sounds of a language into symbols that they need to read? Creative art is a very important phase in the development and the preparation for a child's brain to be able to take multisensory experiences, convert it into symbols, picture symbols that they can draw. Drawing is age-appropriate writing in grade triple R, double R, and still in grade R. A blank page is a child's greatest friend. So we spoke about the importance of language because without understanding oral language and speaking a language and language proficiency, you're wasting your time when you want to teach a child to write. It's child abuse. It really borders on child abuse because they're not equipped for the phase where we want them to start entering the school system. So the second thing is the importance of creative art and to convert thoughts into picture symbols. It's a skill that needs to develop over time, where the eyes, the brain, and the hands need to learn together, because that's what they're going to need high level of proficiency between the eyes, the ears, the brain, and the hands. They need high level of proficiency before they'll be able to write and to read. But there's a third thing, and that's called a body map. So you see, the brain doesn't know what the child looks like. The brain has a map of the body. And when a child is still young and they're still learning to convert what they experience into pictures, they tend to draw a picture like this. So this picture is actually an advanced form of all those separate loose body parts. Can you see all the different body parts? They're there. They're aware of the body parts, but they're not jelly. They're not hanging together. This first picture shows you the child is getting there. They still think their head and their trunk is a unit. They think they're a blob, like a potato. And then they've got arms that come around about where the ears should be. Can you see the total absence of ears? And then you've got these two funny-looking sticks at the bottom with no feet and zero grounding line. So this marvelous potato man is floating up in the air. And when a preschool child draws a grade 1, a grade 2, a grade 3 child, grade 4, grade 5, grade 6 child, if you ask them to draw a picture of yourself and they draw them floating in the air with no grounding line, what they are telling you is, I am not ready for the alphabet because my image of myself is still so immature. My ability to convert what I know into a recognizable picture symbol is still very immature. And can you believe it? Children who draw like that and children who draw like this are in the same class. And at the same time, they are going to start learning about converting the sounds of a language into the symbols. It's not fair. Can you see they're using the whole page? Can you see how the whole body is hanging together? Can you see the awareness of the eyes, the eyebrows, the fingers? Can you see the fingers? Can you see the feet? Can you see the feet are close to the grounding line? When we see this kind of picture, it is marvelous. Check the neck. The neck is a giveaway. These children are ready to learn how to convert the sounds of language into the pictures of language called the ABC. So the moment you see a picture like that, you immediately know this child's brain is developing a marvelous body map. Now, why is this so incredibly important? And what does it have? What has it? There comes my Afrikaans sentence construction. What does a complete body map have to do with reading? Everything. Everything. Who is the most important person in the life of a preschool child? And grade 1, and grade 2, and grade 3, and upwards. It's myself. I am the most important person in the whole wide world. And if I know about me and where I fit into the greater whole around me, then it becomes so much easier to transition into the conversion of sound into picture symbols. Can you please unmute yourself? Can you please unmute yourself? Oh, I'm sorry, can you mute yourself? You've unmuted yourself. Thank you very much. The moment that a child, when they create a picture symbol, hear me, every picture is a conglomerate of picture symbols. But when they draw a picture of themselves within the environment, and there's a grounding line under their feet, international research has shown when the brain knows where the feet are, the brain knows up from down. And you need to know up from down if you want to know where to start when you're going to write the B in boss a little bit later. You need to know where's down. If you need to know the G in goat and the G in whatever other loads of words we can think of that starts with the same letter G, like in goat, like in grave. Oh my hat! Do you know what is a grave? And there comes a whole new conversation and vocabulary, because reading is about conversation long before it's about symbols and recognizing symbols. When that child draws a picture of themselves grounded in the grass, on a stone, on a ball, but grounded on something, the brain knows where's down. And you know, when the brain knows where's down, it is like the brain has found its current location. But I'll say more about that just now. Look at these pictures. Not only are they beautiful drawings, but can you see it's no longer a child in isolation? If I skip back, beautiful drawings, but it's child in isolation. This tells us this child is no longer in isolation. The child is understanding the fundamentals of spatial orientation. They know about relationships. They know about relative size. They know about horizon. They know their brain, their drawing on a blank piece of paper is showing you that their brains are developing. They are learning about gravity. They are learning that their feet creates them a solid base from where to move. Their drawings show us that they are about to embark from the left-hand side of this raging river, where children are still playing freely. They're going to cross this raging river. They're going to get to the other side, because can you see the books on the other side? Can you see those children are happily reading? Why? Because they were able to cross this river from left to right, but through developing age-appropriate skills. They develop their body map first. Keep your eye on little orange shirt, okay? Orange shirt is going to be joined by other children soon, but keep your eyes on orange shirt, because establishing a solid body map, or a map of the body, is step one, is the first stepping stone that will enable a preschool child to convert oral language into written language. How do you develop a body map without understanding something about laterality? What does laterality mean? The body has two sides, a left side and a right side. And it's not just the awareness of, it's also the naming thereof. If I can have a wish, it would be for every mom with a brand new baby, that the moment that baby, just after the placenta dropped, and the mom's holding that baby, say, hello, my darling, look, you've got a left hand and you've got a right hand. Goodness gracious, you've got a left eye and a right eye. You've got a left ear and a right eye. You've got a left leg and a right leg as well. You've got a left nostril and a right nostril. Because if we name the body parts appropriately from a young age, the child won't battle in grade R to tell their left from their right. Because if a child doesn't know about left and right, and they don't know up and down comes first and then left and right, how do you want them to understand the difference between a D and a B later on? Laterality is fundamental to the development, the pre-skills that are needed to develop before a child will be ready to learn to read in grade 1. And the moment we've established a midline, because laterality serves to establish the midline between left and right. And you have to develop the left and the right side of the body before, and in so doing, establish the midline between left and right before you can cross it. And how do you establish that? How do you establish laterality? Running, jumping, rolling, climbing, swinging, twirling to the left, twirling to the right, for years. 6 years. And obviously you'll start crossing the midline in time. Keep your eye on orange shirt, the one in the middle. How can you climb and jump and run and jump on one leg without developing muscle tone? It's a given, because when you start crossing the midline and when you develop muscle tone, you are defying gravity. You're moving closer and closer to a still upright posture that is necessary before a child can concentrate. And the moment the child has developed sufficient muscle tone, that is impossible to develop sufficient muscle tone without developing spatial orientation, because you have to move within the environment, a variety of environment with a variety of textures, grass, gravel, sand, paving stones, uphill, downhill, metal, wood, walking on tennis balls, obviously, that are stabilized, and beanbags and a lot of other stuff. You learn to move your body within the environment. And doing that, you will automatically develop rhythm and timing. It is impossible to read. It is impossible to learn to read without an established body map, with a sufficiently established sense of laterality, crossing that midline that you worked so hard to establish between left and right, developing sufficient muscle tone so that you can sit up in a chair and you don't lie on your seventh vertebra, but you can sit up with your feet flat on the ground, the knees bent, your back straight, because then you will have sufficient muscle tone to enable you to concentrate, because then the brain pays much less attention to your body and way more attention to cognitive development. That enables you to know your positions in space, forwards, backwards, up and down. That's why outside equipment are phenomenally important as pre-reading skills. You develop rhythm and timing and coordination so you can throw and catch balls. Because in doing that, your brain develops a sense of current location. And when the neurologist internationally and every single neuroscientist who pays attention to the role of gravity in mental development will say, if the brain doesn't know where the feet are, the brain can't think straight. Well, I know you don't drink, but you may have seen other people who drink. I know you drink coffee and tea and stuff like that. But you know the alcohol, the moment a person has indulged in alcohol too much, watch how they walk. The brain loses its awareness of the feet. And when they've got goose feet, walking all over the show, ask them to recite the 2 times table, ask them to count backwards from 27 in threes and see how they can't even say their own name. You see, the brain needs a stable awareness of their feet before you can really develop spatial orientation. And how do you develop awareness of your feet? By spending a lot of time on your feet, not on your bum on a seat preschool. You see, because when a child moves, they develop the vestibular system. And the vestibular system is the place in the body where the brain uses the information from gravity. Gravity tells us where's down. Okay, it gives us that sense of current location. And once you've got your sense of current location, think of a GPS. Your feet, can you please mute yourself? The feet act like current location, the body's current location. And the moment your vestibular system is sufficiently developed, because the child has moved gross motor movement. You didn't see a word of gross motor movement on those stepping stones. It's a given. How do you develop laterality? How do you develop muscle tone? How do you cross the midline without gross motor development? It's a given. There's no word about fine motor development. It's a given. If the child moves enough gross motorly, the fine motor development will fall in place. And when the vestibular system is in place, the vestibular system starts controlling a child's movement. Eye movement, eyes are part of fine motor development. If the child hasn't fundamental control over their gross motor development. The development of their hands, which is fine motor development. The development of their eyes, which is fine motor development, can't develop optimally. And if they can't develop their eyes and their hands optimally with a sense, inbuilt sense of direction, because they know where the feet are, they won't develop a sense of direction. Can I please ask you to mute yourself? Chantal, can you please mute the person who's unmuted themselves so we can continue? Thank you. Because with a developed vestibular system, a child, once they can follow direction and they've developed a sense of sequence, go to the kitchen, look on the table, fetch me 3 apples and bring them back to the patio. There's a sense of direction, there's a sense of sequence, there's a series of instructions that the child must remember cognitively while doing a physical activity. And they have to practice that for 6 years before they're close to ready to start working with the direction and sequence of sounds, the sounds of a language. So the moment a child has developed a sense of sequence and direction, can you see they're nearly on at the other side? But then, only then, are they really ready to develop, look at the sequence, auditory and visual perception. Auditory perception before visual perception. And we said why earlier on. All 8 auditory perceptions, all 8 visual perceptions, because only then are they ready to convert oral language into written language. So some people say, is the Mindfulness Institute reading readiness program actually a writing program? No, it's a reading readiness program. But because we teach grade R learners how to convert sound into the sounds of the language that they're going to use in grade 1, that they're going to learn the language of teaching and learning in grade 1. If they're proficient in that language, then in grade R, we teach them to write the sounds that they hear when they speak that language. And we teach them how to write, how to convert sound into written symbols. But they write it before they read it. Because once a child has drawn a picture, can they read their own symbols to you? Of course they can. And that's why at the Mindfulness Institute, we apply the principles, the neuroscience principles called biomimicry. We learn from nature to solve problems that children experience. And in nature, we observed in preschool children that they convert thoughts and the sounds of thoughts into picture symbols before they read those symbols. At the Mindfulness Institute, we're extremely good at finding shortcuts. And we found the shortcut to convert, to teach children to read a language by teaching them to write the language. Because in a way, when we teach them to write the sounds that they hear, we are teaching them coding. Because when you can code sound into a picture symbol, you can learn to decode it in grade 1. Because we don't teach them all the sounds in grade R. We don't have to. Definitely not the capitals, other than the capital in their own name. Definitely not the double sounds. Definitely not the trigraphs and all of those fancy things. That's for grade 1. But if a child in grade R, without any pressure and using their whole body and multisensory experiences, learn to convert the sounds that they hear in words that they speak and know, and they learn to convert that on their body, because who's the most important person in the whole wide world to a preschool child? It's themselves and their own body. And if they learn that preschool child, that every letter of the alphabet starts on you, either on your heart or on your neck or on your head, but they all start on your midline. That's why they need to develop laterality, so they know about the midline, because every letter of the alphabet starts on your midline. You are the center of all the letters in the whole wide world. But you need to learn that without pressure to perform right through grade R. And if you learn that in the neck that slithers around, and it gives you the and the not this in snake, and this in slithers on your body, starting on your heart. Just let me interrupt quickly. Can you see we are looking at the teacher, and teachers write everything in mirror image. So we are facing the teacher that's going to write towards her right, so we can see it as towards our left as the learners. We are the learners facing the screen. And can you see how that's in snake slithers to the left, slithers to the right. And before we get to where the legs start, it slithers to the left again, from top to bottom. Can you hear why they need to know where's top? Can you hear why they need to know where's bottom? Can you hear they need to know their midline? Can you hear they need to know about left and right? Otherwise, they can't learn to code the sounds of a language into symbols long before they learn to read them. Isn't this fascinating? We use at the Mindfulness Institute, our research has shown when you convert sound using a child's body and you convert that into the visual sound symbol of that language, it's so easy to learn to code sound into symbols. And then when I get to grade 1, I can easily decode because I've spent a year in grade R to code. And we never teach children to write one letter in another one. This is just for you and for people who don't know the Reading Readiness program. So I go back. So that's the S. It's just made it much smaller. So you can see the D in dog, or D in dam, or D in dark, or I wish I could ask you, what other words do you know that sounds like the D in dog? It's never the D. It's a D in. It's the in. Because if I say the A in apple and the A in baby, it's not the same A. So we say a sound in a word because it contextualizes, it makes it easy for them to hear it and then convert the sound that they are hearing into a picture sound. Okay, so in our readiness approach, we use the multisensory approach. We use the child's whole body. We use rhymes, we use poems, we use stories, we use themes, because that's how a preschool child learns, and that's how the brain remembers. And then we say, did you know that slithery snakes can swim? Did you know that? Yes, they can swim. They can swim in a dam. I don't like snakes. So let's quickly start on your heart and let's quickly put that snake in a dam. So we go to the left, down, to the right, up to your head, because now I'm no longer afraid of the snake. The snake is in the dam. And now I can draw my line all the way down from my head to where my legs start. Because when I teach a child the code of their language correctly from the beginning, in the correct direction, shaping it in the correct direction, in the right size. In other words, when does it start? When does a letter stay between my neck and where my leg starts? When does a letter start? Where my head starts and come all the way down to where my legs start. And sometimes a letter starts on my heart and it stays in the area between my neck and where my leg starts. But then it drops all the way down to where my feet are. If a child learns that all the letters of the alphabet actually fits onto their body, it starts on me. And when we get much later in the program to the bit in boss, it's not after the d and dan, it's long after the d and dan and all the other letters that are shaped to the left and all the letters that are shaped to my body, like the in light and the in the middle of the in light. That's right in the middle of my body. Then we learn about a boss. What is a boss? And we talk about the boss without showing them the symbol. They must hear the B in boss. And that the B in boss job is to make sure that everybody's doing their work well. And if they're lying on the ground, will they be able to see people do their job well? No. So how must they be? Ask the children. How should they be? What should their posture be like before they can be a boss that can make sure that everybody does their work well? Well, they have to stand upright. Absolutely. Stand upright. Show me with your body. Yes, the B in boss, not the B, the B in boss starts on your head. And then it comes all the way down to where your legs start. And then it makes a big belly because this boss has a big belly to the right. And it comes down. And then it comes to the left again. So it goes right, goes down, it comes left again. And there we've learned the B in boss. We've learned coding in a playful, age-appropriate way in grade R. And then when a child is ready, they've experienced it with their whole body. So please, teachers, hear that shaping the letters of the alphabet with clay is marvelous. It's multisensory. But we found that when we apply neuroscience and we use that multisensory awareness on their own body, so they start using their body as a current location from where to shape and organize all the letters, and that they are all shaped around me. They're not far off. They're all shaped around me on paper. Oh, coding becomes even easier. And can you imagine how easy decoding will then be in grade 1 and 2 or 3? So you can use the same approach for a remedial, for children who need to catch up, who weren't ready, school ready, who didn't develop the pre-reading skills that were necessary to enable them to code language, verbal language into written language so they can decode it in school. But the program is aimed at grade R. A whole year of learning to code the sounds of a language into the written symbols, one sound at a time. So when we then teach them to take that three-dimensional experience onto a flat two-dimensional surface, we draw a picture of themselves. So as you face the screen, you are looking at the back of your head. The image on screen is facing in the same direction as you. That image is also facing the screen. Can you see? You're looking at the back of this person. So their left, their feet are perfectly grounded, and their left is up there where we've drawn a little lion. Why lion? It's for left. It's alliteration, which makes it, it's a rhythm, it's a pattern. Brain loves pattern. The brain is a prediction-making machine. It recognizes patterns. So if you say lion represents left, and initially you draw a little lion, or just the lion's head, on their left hand, and you draw, I wonder what are we going to do with the right hand? We're going to make a red dot on the right hand. Why a red dot? Because it's a red dot that goes on the right hand. What's the same? Red and right, or dot and right? No, man, it's red and right. Yes, red dot on the right hand, lion on the left hand, and now I can position the letters of the alphabet. And they all start with me because my body is the map for coding language into symbols. We always start on me with every single letter in the alphabet. So if I want to write the A in apple, oh, we must start on me. Why? I'm the most important person in the whole wide world. All letters of the alphabet start on me. And I go to the left and round and down. And I turn where my legs start, and I go up and I stop where my legs start, and I go down and I stop where my legs start. That's what I've done three-dimensionally on my own body. Now I just convert this onto a two-dimensional plane, and I'm teaching them that the letters of the alphabet still all start on me, but now we do it two-dimensionally. And we teach them all the letters to the left first. Please make sure that you understand that the Mindfulness Institute's Reading Readiness program is actually a writing program. It is a coding program. It converts sound into visual symbols using our body as a current location. But that's only possible once the brain knows the feet are firmly grounded on earth, because now all the letters of the alphabet start on me, and we teach them all the letters that are shaped to the left of me first, and then we teach them all the letters that are shaped on my midline, and then we teach them all the letters that are shaped to the right of me. But we don't teach them the letters. What we actually teach them, just stop sharing, is we teach them that the sounds of language, the words that we say, the objects that we can name, that when we take those things that we talk about and we identify phonological awareness, we identify those sounds, and I can hear them in many, many different words. Initially, as the beginning sound, later as the end sound, and finally as the sound in the middle, because in the middle is the most difficult to discriminate. And that is only possible after we've done a lot of auditory perception activities, which are not in workbooks. That is, we spend years and lots of money on visual workbooks. Our children's problem is not visual. Visual perception is by far more developed than the average child's auditory perception. How do we know that? Do they listen the first time? No, they don't. We need to teach them to listen, because if they can't listen, and if they can't identify sounds purely by listening, how do you expect them to recognize those sounds when they have to read later on? Yeah, here comes a very important thing. You see, when we write, we take sound and we put it down in a book. When we read, we listen to the visual symbols. We listen to the visual symbols. If you cannot hear what that symbol is saying, if that symbol is saying the a in apple, if I can see the symbol, but it has no sound, then you can't read. But the only way you can associate, the brain can associate sound with symbol, is for them to hear the sounds first, because hearing develops before sight. And then once their hearing is properly developed, now show them what that sound in apple. But first I show you the apple. What is this? This is an apple. This is a real apple. Yeah. And what did I just show you? Yeah, that was an apple, wasn't it? What is that first sound in apple? It's the a in apple. Can you hear the a? in apple. Yes. Is it the same as the a in ant? Yes. They both make the same a in ant and a in apple. Do you know what it looks like? It has a picture. But you see, it's not your own picture, it's somebody else's pictures. Ladies, it's called standardized pictures. Somebody else, the alphabet is standardized pictures, somebody else's pictures, somebody else's symbols. But the child needs to acquire those symbols to be able to decode those symbols later and hear the sound. Writing is putting sound down on screen or paper. Reading is listening to the sound. And if you want to argue, please do. But before you do, think of somebody with low vision or no vision, somebody that's blind. Can they see? Nope. Can they read? Yes. How do they do that? They hear the sound and they convert them into braille that they can feel. So they feel instead of seeing. They feel with, they see with their hands. They feel, and what they feel, they pull the sound out of the symbols that they can feel with the tips of their fingers. There's only one thing you need to take away from this afternoon. If we do not teach children how to code sound in grade R, in a slowly, in a multisensory way, using their sensory motor systems, if we don't do that gradually, in a fun way, during grade R, it is very difficult to be forced to do the coding and the decoding simultaneously in grade 1. I want to challenge you. Nelspruit. Nelspruit. I challenge you. Any school, I challenge you. If you spend time in grade R teaching children to code sound into visual symbols, I want to challenge you to compare those children's performance and reading in grade 1 with the children who you didn't teach to code sound in grade R. Without a shadow of a doubt, without a shadow of a doubt, you'll see the difference. But simultaneously, there's a word of caution. The neuroscience behind the Mindfulness Institute's Reading Readiness program, which, by the way, dovetails perfectly with the science of reading. Perfectly. It's hand in glove. It goes hand in glove. There's no contradictions. There's just an extra step to step up in grade R so they can fly even faster and even higher when they start decoding and recognizing some of the symbols. There are many symbols, many more symbols that they are going to learn in grade 1, but they've got a head start. They understand the fundamentals of coding sound into visual images. If we can understand that, you can just believe me. But if you're really interested in the science that underpins the Mindfulness approach to reading readiness by teaching them to write the symbols of the sounds that they recognize in grade R, you can look at the Gravity book, Gravity, A Missing Link in Child Development. It's a book that's available on Amazon. It's available from the Mindfulness Institute. If you Google the Jager books, you'll find it on the internet as well. The Gravity book gives you the entire background, 300 and whatever pages, that gives you the science in a palatable way, the science that underpins this, some call revolutionary approach to reading readiness, not to reading readiness. I don't know if there's one or two questions that you would like to ask before we wrap up. I do apologize for going over time. I know we said 2 to 3, but if there's one or two questions, I'll gladly answer quickly. Chantal,
yep. So Estelle is asking, is it appropriate to ask children to draw everything that starts with a specific sound?
Does she mean to focus on one sound, give them concrete experiences like the apple and the ant, and concrete experiences, must be concrete first, and then ask them to draw what they've learned? I would do that. I would do that. That's wonderful. But it's also forced. It's not spontaneous. You can ask them to draw a picture of themselves that includes an apple and an ant, or many apples and many ants. And draw me a picture of all the places where you can find apples. Can you hear? It's a completely different instruction. Because now they need to position the apples, in apple, and ant. They have to position it in a whole picture, because that is really what a sentence is. So I would do that, but I would be very careful to be too formal. If they've experienced the apples and the ants and things like that, if they've gone outside and looked for ants and use a magnifying glass to really look at them and to really discuss them, and if you then ask them to draw it, they're going to draw it differently in any case. They will not forget an ant and an apple. And then when you then progress to the letter symbol, that letter symbol is the magnifying glass. It's the walk outside. It's the bag of apples that you brought to school. It's green apples, red apples, yellow apples. You understand? If they've experienced it and you then ask them to draw, and you then show them what that symbol looks like. And all of this happens in 1 week, 2 weeks, till they're ready and they are able to write the letter A on their own body in the correct direction and within the correct plane of the body. Then we progress to paper. Is there anything else?
I don't see any other questions. Anyone else have a question?
Maybe I can just make a comment. So one of the things that I've developed, that I'm very sorry I developed, is a workbook that goes with the Mind Moves Institute's Reading Readiness program. Because what unfortunately happens is people now use the workbook to teach children to trace. Burn the workbook. That is a misuse of the workbook. I will sue you if I find out that you ever give a child. I tell you now, if you ever give a child the Mind Moves Institute's Reading Readiness workbook and you expect them to trace those letters, I will sue you, because that's a misuse, inappropriate use of the workbook. The workbook is the end of a process. If you do not go the multisensory whole body learning experience, if they haven't written the letters of the alphabet and of the sounds that they recognize and can recognize and say, they haven't done it in the body, please do not use the workbook. Then you're going to just do the same thing that you've always done, and that's miskin. How do you say that in English? It's a total disregard for the nature of the preschool child, which is to learn in a multisensory way with their entire body. And one last comment is we often get the comment, won't you please tell the Department of Education? Nothing that we discussed this afternoon is in any way different to what the Department of Education have said in a different way. So this is not going against the Department of Education. It is actually applying caps in a scientific way within the scope of and respecting the nature of a grade R child. I thank you for this afternoon. I don't know if there's anything else, Chantal. The very last one.
So Estelle asks again, do you give them the body shape you showed and then practice the sounds writing, if I understand correctly?
Once you've done it the children have done it on their own body. After this discussions, after the development of the vocabulary, or after developing phonological awareness of a sound, after all of that stuff, you then can present them with a paper, because you need to transition from the three-dimensional experience of their body onto paper, because that's how we code. We need to code them two-dimensionally on paper. So you give them an image like that. It's freely available on the internet. But it only has sense and meaning if you understand that that image on paper is facing in the same direction as you. So left is left, right is right. So don't reverse it. If you understand that, then it is very easy for them to position the letters of the alphabet on their own body. It's fun, and we do it with fat crayons initially. It doesn't have to be perfect. They will refine their movement in time, but let them just get it that all the letters in the whole wide world start on me. I thank you.